Hello, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to HIE 101, Historical Origins of the Contemporary World. I'm Dr. Kevin Brushett, the lead instructor for the course. And today I'd like to just briefly go through the course outline, some of the expectations about what we're going to be covering in the course, the expectations in terms of the work we're going to expect from you, and some of the basic course mechanics. It will likely appear, we will all four of the instructors in this course, who I'll briefly introduce to you in just a minute, occur across a video platform. There may be opportunities to meet later in term if the college health regulations and COVID situation permit us. But this will likely be the way that we will have contact with you throughout the term. We wish it were otherwise. I'm sure you wish it were otherwise as well. So HIE 101. So like I said, there'll be four instrucors in the course. I'll be the lead instructor, and you should see all of our bios that are available on each of the Moodle pages, explaining who each of us are and the areas of our expertise. Just as a brief reminder, Dr. Marie-Michelle Doucet is a historian of French and European history, largely of the early 21st century, and largely of women's and women peace organizations operating in the interwar period. Dr. Asa McKercher is, like myself, a Canadian historian who works largely in the area of Canadian foreign relations, particularly in the post-World War II period, and particularly Canadian-American relations since the Prime Minister John Diefenbaker era. And last but not least, we have Dr. Vanessa Oliveira, who is a historian of Africa, of slavery, and of women merchants. And so, as you can see, we don't quite cover the entire globe, but we hope to present a diversity of historical understandings, historical viewpoints, and historical expertise to you in a course that is really about the global history of the last 3 centuries. So History 101, as it says, right, is historical origins of the contemporary world. And so ultimately, the course is designed around helping you understand the world in which you inhabit today and the world in which you will inherit of tomorrow. And so it seeks to explain the historical genesis and development of a world of approximately 7.7 billion people, but growing every day, organized into hundreds of nation states and international organizations, governed by the dictates, as we know, of a global capitalist marketplace, and dominated for the most part by a liberal, or some people call it neoliberal, ideology, emphasizing individual political rights and freedom of expression, although we know that those are by no means universal, and that we know in many cases over the last 5 or 10 years, those have been eroding in certain places, certainly on the ground in Afghanistan as we speak today. So it seeks to understand the impact of these developments, and it also seeks to understand the impact these developments have had on the physical environment. So again, thinking about the hot summer we've been through, issues around climate change, issues around the environment, the very physical environment in which we live. And that can be the natural environment, or it can even be the built environment, the ways in which most of us now live in cities rather than in the countryside. So the objective of the course, I think, is twofold, right? Present how humanity has been affected and also has affected. History is about people. History is about people in action, and people making choices to do things, sometimes not always of their own will or understanding, but history is driven largely by human action, both individually and collectively. And to understand the development of these phenomena and to explain the constant weight of the past in their evolution. So, as Lincoln said, Abraham Lincoln said, we cannot escape history. We understand our world in a kind of, we may look to the future, but we understand our world according to the past, okay? It's different than many courses in 2 respects. First, again, it begins with the present rather than necessarily starting at some point in the past. And as you'll see, in some ways, the course doesn't start at a particular date. I mean, we can roughly date it from probably the middle of the 18th century as the kind of emergence of the quote unquote modern world, but sometimes we'll start it later, sometimes we'll start it earlier in that sense. Also importantly, this is not a course that's going to start at a particular date and end at a particular date. So when we think about history, we think of things about, change over time and things happening across time or chronologically. This course will obviously deal with that and try and understand how things have developed over time, what has changed, what has not. But it does throw largely through the lens of various themes that we think are most important to understanding the world. And some of those I've already mentioned, right? The development of nation states, development of a capitalist economy, the importance of the changing racial, sexual identities and relationships between men and women, a whole range of things, right? And so we've identified a number of key areas that we think are most important to understanding how we've got here today. So if you turn to page 2 of the course outline, the syllabus, you'll see that the general learning objectives of the course are broadly fourfold. One is to impart you some degree of historical knowledge. So quote unquote facts, although we'll talk about what is a historical fact and what is not. But we're going to talk about some of the major developments over the past 3 or so centuries: social, political, economic, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, the Sexual Revolution, the Russian Revolution, just to name a couple of things, right? We'll talk about science, the development of science and technology, and the move from steam to oil and automobility, and then into jet travel, and then space travel, and all of those other kinds, the computer revolution, the information revolution, the development of the internet, all of those other kinds of things, the printing revolution, which we go all the way back to Gutenberg. We'll see that in some ways there have been multiple industrial revolutions, there have been multiple information revolutions, but we'll cover, at least in a broad sense, some of those major events, major patterns in history, and obviously keying in on some of the key individuals who were important to their development, and other social groups that would have been important and affected by them as well. But I would say most importantly are the 3 things that carry on after that in the chart. And one is historical thinking. So we're going to start to get you to think like historians, or at least understand how historians think, how they approach the past, how they approach issues of evidence, how they construct and concoct their histories. And so what questions do they ask? How do they frame those questions? What conclusions do they draw from them, and with any degree of certainty, right? So we're going to key in on those 6 basic concepts of historical thinking and get you to think about how they apply to the issues and questions that we're going to raise in this course. And I encourage you to follow the link there to historicalthinking.ca to see those 6 critical historical concepts. Okay. We're going to analyze the sources of history. So how do historians put together the past? And that is, what kind of sources do they use? What kind of bits and pieces? So government reports, diaries, oral histories, visual media, all of those other kinds of things. We're going to get you to look at some of those things, and again, to think about how those are the building blocks of historical understanding and of historical knowledge, and historical narratives. And so students will understand how they assess those sources in creating those narratives about the past. Again, what questions, what analytical tools, what methods do they use to draw out information, to draw out significance, right? Okay, and then we'll get you to create and communicate history, right? That each person is in some ways has their own history, but is in some ways their own historian, right? We all have narratives about our own pasts. We have narratives about the past of our families, of our communities, of our organizations, or other things that we're involved in. And so we want you to be able to assess historical debates and interpretations, because history is never just kind of written in stone in that sense. That historians are always debating the past and its meaning, and in many ways, in light of what's going on in their present day world, they take their understanding of that world and look for ways in which that might be understood in the past. And so we're going to look at those kinds of things and get you to kind of assess them. And so you will have to complete assignments that understand how to put a narrative together, how to deconstruct a narrative, how to assess the ways in which historians look at those primary sources and things like that. And then obviously, we're going to have you obviously write those things up and be able to do so, right, in clear, cogent, and logical prose in that regard. So again, writing and writing skills matter in history as much as they do in your English course or any other course, really, in many ways. Okay, some basic mechanics. Class schedule. So the class meets for 3 hours every week. Now, the meeting element of it is obviously going to change given that it's online. So generally the Monday periods, which is 1540 to 1630, and please note that we are not shifting classes by an hour this year as we had done last year. So 1540 Eastern Standard Time on Mondays, and then Wednesdays 11 to 1250 Eastern Standard Time. Okay. Now, generally, the Monday's classes, you will not be required to be present. Those are the ones that you will use to watch the lectures that each one of us will be delivering in the course from week to week. And we're going to, in our own areas of specialty, going to present you lectures. So you won't get the same professor every week. We're going to give you the benefit of hearing from diverse perspectives across the course and from each prof who has particular areas of historical interest and historical expertise. So you're going to get the benefit in some ways of 4 profs in that regard. So the Monday period will be available for you to watch the lecture, which will be approximately an hour long or less. And then the Wednesdays is when the class really kind of meets, and we'll meet largely either on Zoom or Big Blue Button according to the preferences of the professor. This will be what we call sort of the seminar period, in which we will ask you to come to class prepared, having done the readings for the week, having watched the lecture, and be prepared to ask questions, to answer questions, to perhaps do some activities that draw upon the knowledge and information and understanding of the week, so that we can kind of come to a greater understanding of what all of that information and all of that, all of what those readings mean and imply and have impact on our present day world. Okay. Now on the Wednesdays, those classes will likely meet split in 2. So each section has approximately 24 students, but 24 students on a Zoom screen at any one time can be taxing, not just for us professors, but for each of you as students. And so we are going to split the class in 2. And so group A or group 1 will meet between 11 and 11:50. And then group 2 or group B will meet between 12 and 12:50. So this hopefully will limit your Zoom fatigue, your online studying fatigue, and hopefully a meeting in smaller groups that you will get to know each other a little bit better. We'll get to know you a little bit better as well. And that you'll have more effective time in the classroom, right? And this is what we want to go for is the effectiveness rather than the duration, right? So likely the class will likely only meet in any kind of physical sense or virtual sense for 1 hour a week, okay? And the other hours of the week, you're expected to be watching the lectures, preparing any materials for the seminar period. There might be exercises in which you're asked to do something a little bit ahead of time, and doing your readings and doing your all of your other coursework. Okay, there are no textbooks for the course. All readings will be provided via Moodle, so there'll be links in Moodle to get them, and there will be sort of individual pieces and articles by historians. And we mean to do this to, in some ways, because there is no textbook for this course. It's a very unique course in many ways. But also because we want to kind of decenter that kind of textbook learning, the kind of the authoritative, this is the way things are, right, kind of approach to history. And we want you to delve into the kind of historical debates and interpretations and viewpoints of actual individual historians and understand how history works. And we think we can do this much better by giving you shorter pieces, journal articles, chapters, and things like that, excerpts from chapters, rather than giving you what even I would consider sometimes is a dry, dusty textbook. So we're going to, again, make your reading more effective rather than more extensive. And there'll be probably at least 2 articles of approximately 20 to 30 pages each week. So you'll be expected to read about 60 pages a week. Okay. There are 2 texts that are available that might be important to the course, or that you might want to use if necessary. They are available through the Massey Online collections, and it's by J.R. McNeil and Kenneth Pomerantz. Again, these are collected works in which different authors have talked about historical themes and historical ideas and historical events over the past 3 centuries and their impact in creating the kind of quote unquote modern world. Okay, and those are available through the Cambridge Histories in the Massey Library databases. Okay, I'm going to skip over the next bit on our evaluation scheme because I'm going to return to that shortly. Just to note here, a number of submission requirements. Everything basically will happen through Moodle, other than potentially the seminars, which will happen on Zoom. If someone wants to use Big Blue Button, then it will occur again. You'll have access through Moodle. So Moodle will be where you get all the information for the course. It will also be the place where you submit all your information to the course or all your assignments. And assignments should have a title page outlining who your name and student number and the course and the assignment number and all of those other kinds of things. We're also going to ask you to use the Chicago reference, to use proper references according to the Chicago reference style. We'll talk more about this in the coming weeks, and there are some examples of this later in the course outline, but also available on the Moodle page with links to the Chicago Manual of Style, but also bibliographic management software that you might use that will help you put it in the right format. And again, any assignment that doesn't meet the kind of basic elements here will be returned to students and you will have to resubmit, and late penalties will apply. Now, late penalties are generally in the course 10% per day. After 5 days, assignments won't be accepted. There are going to be exceptions to those. And again, if for some reason you know of a situation coming up in term where it will be impossible for you to meet that deadline, then certainly reach out ahead of time. We understand that life gets in the way of your studies, and we're not necessarily going to penalize you for that, but we need you to be open and honest with us on why you might need an extension. We also understand that people get sick and hurt and all kinds of other things from time to time that can impact their studies. And again, we will need documentation outlining why, again, you cannot meet the deadline. One other thing I want to draw your attention to is Academic Regulation 10.2, and that is all coursework needs to be submitted before the final exam so that you can write the final exam. Any professor or instructor at RMC in any course can deny a student from writing the final examination if they do not submit all of their coursework. Whether or not it receives a 90 or a 0 because it is 5 or 10 days late, it still needs to be submitted. And if it's not submitted, instructors and professors may prevent you from writing the final exam. So in other words, you can't just do a couple of assignments, do well, brush off the other ones, come back and write the final exam and squeak through with a 50, right? You need to do all the work in the course to get your grade. Okay. I'm just going to highlight below an issue of sort of issues around respect and diversity, and this also includes issues around learning diversities as well. So we also understand that students will have and may need accommodations to complete their work. And if this is the case, then I encourage you to reach out to the registrar's office, particularly to Mihaela Staniso, who's the academic accommodation coordinator, and also familiarize yourself with academic policy number 5, which outlines the kind of rights and responsibilities of those who require an accommodation of a learning disability. Okay, so, and again, please make sure that your professors are well aware of those accommodations, because we genuinely want to be able to help you learn in the best way that you can, and we're certainly committed to your success. The other element of that is respect for diversity and inclusion, right? And so we understand that everyone comes to this class, including the professors, including all of the material that we are going to present to you, that it's going to be diverse, and we're going to try and make it as inclusive as possible. And we understand that people come with diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences that are all in some ways very, very unique. And we encourage you to bring that uniqueness to the course. We respect and cherish the diversity that each one of us brings to the classroom experience. And we expect that you will treat your fellow students and professors very much in the same way. And so there may be disagreements between us about, historical developments, their importance, how they developed, why they developed. And so we expect that when we have those disagreements and we agree to disagree, that we do so in ways that always respects the dignity of all the dignity of all individuals within the course. And certainly, if you feel that those rules are not being met, then we certainly ask you to reach out to us to alert us, and that can be certainly on the part of the professors as well as anyone else in the course. And again, if you have suggestions for improvements to the course, please, we encourage you to reach out, and they certainly are very much appreciated. This is your education. Academic integrity. So this is something that the college treats extremely seriously, and each one of us in the course as professors treats extremely seriously. So this is academic regulation, section 23.1, which outlines what constitutes things like cheating, plagiarism, and the violation of other academic ethics. Please make yourself fully aware of academic regulation 23.1. It is at the heart of an RMC education: truth, duty, valor, and you cannot be practicing truth, duty, valor while cheating or plagiarizing your essays. So it is central. The college, all wings, academic wing, training wing, you name it, is vitally concerned with academic integrity. Okay. Students who submit plagiarized essays or essays with plagiarized material will be reported to me, to the department head, and to the dean for further investigation. And the processes outlining academic integrity investigations are contained in Academic Policy Directive #1, and they also outline the range of penalties and actions that might result from a finding of guilt in the process. Okay, so just a quick thing is, and I know probably no one sets out to do these kinds of things, and certainly we will guide you through the course of what are practices that abide by academic integrity. We will help you do things like learning how to footnote and all of those other kinds of more technical issues. But it is something that we expect you to uphold and to understand. And certainly, if you don't understand, please come forward, and we will do our best to explain to help you understand it. All assignments. So in that regard, all assignments in the course will be submitted through Moodle through something known as turnitin.com, which is a similarity, textual similarity finder. So it looks for text that is the same, either within its own database or across the web. So it will find entries in Wikipedia. It will find entries in journal articles that are posted to that are on the internet. It will find your fellow students' paper from 3 years ago that you may have decided that you wanted to look at and to see how to do the assignment, and that you may have borrowed some phrases from. They will show up in this assignment. Now, it's a textual similarity, so it doesn't mean that you're automatically flagged as having plagiarized, but it does mean that profs will have to inquire what are the reasons for that similarity, right? And whether or not it's acceptable. Finally, intellectual property. So everything that will be posted on Moodle belongs to the professors who produced it. So that's including lecture notes, PowerPoint slides, handout materials, examinations, assignments. Any materials posted to Moodle are the intellectual properties of the course instructor. These things have been produced for your use in your education, and they are not intended for wider dissemination or communication outside of a given course. So posting anything that comes from this course outside of this course will be considered a violation of the instructor's intellectual property rights and of the Canada Copyright Act. So we please ask you not to do so. right? In that sense. And recording of lectures in any way is prohibited unless the course instructor has granted specific permission. So again, we are doing this because of the way in which education is going to have to unroll this term, but we expect you to abide by the fact that these belong to the professors who have produced them. Okay, so briefly, I don't want to spend too much more time here. Just briefly on the assignments that you'll be expected to produce over the next 12 to 13 weeks. So we're going to start you off. So the whole idea of this course is to scaffold your skills and your understanding of the course material and of how to write and produce papers in history. And so we're going to start at the bottom level and start with two article précis. So a précis is essentially kind of a condensed version. So we're going to get you to do a reading from one of the week's readings. And we're going to ask you to condense that from probably 20 to maybe 30 pages in length to something that's only 2 or 3 pages in length. And you're going to pay attention to the particular, going to outline what's the author's main argument, their approach to the subject matter, give a brief summary of the supporting evidence and arguments that they use to back up that central claim, right? So you're going to get it down to the kind of nuts and bolts of what it is, right? And so this will test your reading comprehension, right? As well as your ability to write in a clear and concise way, because you're only going to have 2 to 3 pages to do so, right? So can you identify the most important information in an article? And can you relate that in a way that's clear and cogent to someone else? And that may be clear and cogent to someone else who perhaps maybe has chosen another article to do a précis. Okay. So we're going to get you to do that twice. Once beginning of October, and again, a second on October 25th. And it'll be basically the same assignment, just done twice. So we'll give you kind of a first crack at it. Well, hopefully you do very, very well. If you don't, then we will work with you to improve it. And I should note here that all of the profs in the course take the approach that it's not where you start, but where you finish. And so we don't judge you on your first assignment. My first assignment at university was terrible. But I eventually got an A in the course. So I'm hoping that if that's the case with you, that you end up in the same, that you certainly end up in the same situation. Okay. So you're going to get to do that twice. Okay. The second one will be a primary source analysis. So again, we're going to get you to go back and look at a historical document, a historical artifact, and try to look at it with the lens of a historian, asking the same kinds of questions that historians ask when they might pick up a diary or a letter or a government report in some archive somewhere or in somebody's basement that they've come across or whatever else, right? And so where did this come from? Who wrote it? What's the purpose of it? What are they trying to do? Who's the audience of it? Was this ever meant to be seen by others, right? Is it a personal diary entry in which people never expected that, you know, some historian 100 or 200 or 300 years in the future would read? Or is it something that people thought they should read? I mean, letters produced in the past, we think of them as letters as something very personal today, but letters were often read out to other family members, to friends, all kinds of things. So then in some ways, and sometimes even to large groups. Lincoln's letters, Lincoln produced letters and he expected them to be read in public gatherings. So sometimes they were meant for private consumption, sometimes they were meant for public consumption. So we're going to ask you to think about how those documents were produced, how historians use them, what questions they can answer from them, and what questions might they still not be able to answer. Okay. All right, so that's the second. But the last one, a written assignment, will be a critical analysis assignment in which we're going to give you 2 pieces of history. So 2 pieces from historians on a similar topic. One will be from the course, one will be something that we will choose from somewhere else. And we're going to ask you to compare and contrast them. So it'll build on the skills that you will have developed in the first assignment. So being able to condense and understand an argument and read for what are the main points, what are the main arguments, what's the approach, what's the interpretation, what's the methodology of the historian involved. And then you'll have to then compare and contrast them, right? Where do they differ? Are those differences important? are the similarities more important? Do they lead to radically different conclusions? And if that's the case, then which one do you think is more cogent or credible, better written, right? So we're going to ask you to kind of critically analyze and think about how historians weigh when they write their histories, right? They have all of these other histories that have been written by other historians, all about the same subject, right? Which one do they choose to go with, right? Which one do they lean more towards, and then why do they do so, right? What choices are they making? So we're going to get you to do that, and that'll be the final written assignment, other than the final exam, in the course. So other areas of assessment will be participation. So that'll be the Wednesdays. So Wednesdays, we're going to meet together for that 1 hour in the kind of seminars. We're going to do activities. We're going to have discussions. So we expect you to come to class prepared, having done the readings, watch the lectures, so that you can participate with some degree of meaning. Because again, if nobody prepares, then we can't have a discussion. And if only some people prepare, then they are doing the bulk of the work for the group, right? And so we want to be able to share ideas and share understandings, share misunderstandings, and why did we come to those, and let's resolve them, and all kinds of other things, right? But we can only do so if everyone comes prepared and everyone is willing to participate in some way. Now, we recognize that some of you are going to be more gregarious or more shy than others, but there are many ways to participate in the activities. And again, in the interests or in the idea of diversity and inclusion, we're going to try and make it as inclusive as possible so that everyone gets a chance to participate and their participation is welcomed and accepted. Okay. And so, those weekly tutorials, they may have specific activities, but you're expected to prepare for them, do all the readings, watch the lectures. And again, the only way that we know that you're doing the work and understanding the work, right? Or in some cases, I mean, it's fine. If you misunderstand the work, that's fine. You come to class and you figure it out, right? But the only way we can have any sense of that you are doing the work is for you to actually participate. Okay, so like I said, we're going to try and create this as a place of positive space in which we can have discussions, we can ask questions, answer questions, but again, in ways that respects the fundamental dignity of everyone involved in the matter of academic inquiry and the free exchange of ideas. Okay, the final exam will be your final assignment. It'll be handed out at the end of term. It'll be worth 30%, and it will likely be a take-home examination unless things change at the college between now and December. Don't worry, as we approach the final exam, we will give you much clearer instructions about what will be the format and what will be expected. So welcome to HIE 101. Welcome to RMC. For those of you who are not in your first year, who are taking this course in your up years, welcome back to RMC. Again, we wish we could be doing this in person, and there may be opportunities for us to meet in person later in the term, depending on how things develop with the term. But if not, we will use this forum to get to know one another and to learn about the history of global history of the last 3 centuries. So see you in the seminars and in the lectures. Remember, the first class meeting will be Wednesday, September 8th, starting at 11 a.m. Thanks, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.